Hi. So with the new AI generated art that we've been seeing a whole lot from Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, DALL-E 2 and all that kind of stuff, people have been trying to push this and trying to figure out ways to utilize AI into their own art. And for me, what I wanted to do was I wanted to start incorporating my own photography into AI. So here is how I went from this artificial intelligence generated image of, I think I generated just a flower princess or something like that. I forgot what the prompts were. And went from that to that. Now, as we get started, I will kind of go through the entire workflow process for the first time. This video will show me taking a photograph and integrating it into the AI for the very first time. So it isn't like something that I've done before and tried to recreate for this video. It is you'll see me making mistakes and all that kind of stuff. So there we go. Let's go ahead and get started. And at the end of the video, I'll kind of go through the video kind of quickly, and at the end I will make more of an effort to go back and recount and reiterate what I just did to make this image possible, and try to explain things a bit more if you want to see that, and try to explain things and try to tell you what I did as far as the check layers are concerned and how to color correct and get things matching in color and in shadow and with frequency separation and all that business, and try to explain that a bit clearer, I guess, even though it does take practice. So it isn't something that you're going to be able to follow along with and be able to do right off the bat. If you are, then congratulations to you. But it is something that takes a little bit of practice. So enjoy, and I'll see you again at the end to recap. So I am going to now try to combine this photo you see here, this photo here, which is an AI generated photo, and I'm going to try to put my girlfriend's face on it. So this is how I would do that. Now, this is not going to be a comprehensive Photoshop tutorial, but I'm going to go over the techniques as well as the theory behind how to make this work. Because whenever you view this, you can see that there is a vast color difference here. So you can see this little black square here. This color here represents the color I just took from the cheek. That's your highlight color. This color here represents the color over here in the shadow area of the skin. And this color here, this purplish color, is going to be the color in the shadows of just sort of a general shadow color. Yeah, let me take a look here. Here's some shadows over in the, yeah, again, same type of color. So we need to duplicate these highlights, midtones, and shadows in this image right there. So we need to combine them. I want to keep this look of the picture, but I want to composite my girlfriend's face onto it. So what I did here, here's the picture I took. Here's the AI image. So the first thing you have to consider when compositing an image in is that you have to look at the image and look at how it is shot, because you can't just take an existing photo and slap it in there. You have to consider a couple things. One is the angle and the height of the camera. So right now we're looking pretty much straight on. The camera's a little bit lower than her eye line. You also have to look at the angle of the lighting. So if you look at this image here, change my color to my red. Let's take a look at the angle of the light. So right here, underneath the nose, you have this look. Whoop, whoop, whoop. This is called paramount lighting. It's also called butterfly lighting. This means that the light is almost directly overhead our subject. And you can tell in the catch lights of the eyes. This is an AI image, so I'm not expecting it to be quite on the money. But you can see that the catch lights in the eyes, right there, are almost directly overhead. Now, they're a little bit off because this is an AI image, but here is something you can do to really duplicate the lighting setup of your photography. This is a program called Satellite 3D Studio. And what you can do is you can load in an image. You can load in a 3D model and a setup of your own making. So here I have a rectangular room. This is like my kitchen. This is where I usually shoot in. The height of my ceiling is around 8 feet, so it is a small room. I don't have this, but if we take a look at the original image here, we got this sort of greenish background, so I've tried to kind of duplicate that green color. But most importantly here is I'm using a one light setup. I have a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, shooting at around 80 to 100 millimeters on that. The program I'm using here will kind of let you know how you want to dial in the power of your light, as well as the distance of your camera and the distance of your light and all this kind of stuff. And I'm using a modifier over here. And this is what I used in my kitchen to shoot my image. And this is just to absorb the light a bit more and create this shadow over here. So if you take a look here at the lighting setup, here is my light. It is a softbox. If we take a look at the angle of the light, you can see that the angle of the light is not directly on her face. It is going to be actually, here's the little pink line, that is the middle of the bulb. So you can move this around. You can watch the shadow change on the subject's face and neck. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to duplicate this light setup. So we have shadows over here, highlights over here, highlights right almost directly overhead, a bit more shadow on this side than on this side. So it's not directly in front of the model. It's a little bit over here to camera right. So to feather that light a bit more, we're going to aim down a bit more. Watch this angle of this shadow. And we're going to kind of shoot more towards her hand or towards the floor. And that's going to feather the light a bit more to kind of create that nice shadow there. And so yeah, you can use this Satellite 3D to kind of mess around with your angles of your lighting and try to determine where to set up everything before you actually get in there and start messing around with things. So that's a easy, nice tool to use. Let's get rid of that. So before we begin our compositing, I want to reiterate this. We are going to use, come on, get rid of this, go away. So you have your AI image that you want to duplicate. Before you shoot your photography, to duplicate this image here, what you need to do is you need to determine the lighting setup, and you also need to determine the perspective, making sure that the perspective is going to be right. There's many tutorials on how to judge perspective. On this particular image, we're not really worried about perspective because you don't see her feet and there's no horizon line in the background. It's pretty much just a straight shot, but you can kind of tell where your camera needs to be set up. And you can tell here from this angle of the shadow here, angles of the shadows over here, her face. And I've duplicated that relatively close on my model over there. So looking pretty good to start off with. So let's begin. I have my original image right there. I'm just going to group this with itself, call this original. And I'm going to pull in my real life model, which I've already done a sort of cursory retouch. I'm going to retouch it a bit more later, but just a sort of a cursory retouch just so I can kind of gauge where the colors need to be at. So I've already cut it out because you don't need to see what's below here. So I'm just going to use my move tool and I'm going to pull it over here and drop it on top of the layer. So there we go. Now we need to sort of resize it to make it look as close as possible. So I'm going to bring down the opacity just a bit. I'm also going to put a black and white layer above this, just to kind of make it easier to differentiate what's what. What I did was created a clipping mask. This is a hue saturation layer. I held down the Alt key and I hovered my mouse right above that little, right in between these two layers. That gives you the clipping icon. You can also use this icon down there to clip it to the layer so that it only affects the layer below it. I'll be using clipping masks quite a bit. So now let's pull this over here, line up the eyes a bit better, and we're going to do Control T to transform it. I'm going to try to get this as close as possible. Now it's not going to be perfect because everyone has a different face, but we want to try to get the eyes lined up and the mouths lined up a bit better. There we go. That's pretty close. You can tell the original lips from the real life lips. Alright, let's also look at the nose. Bring our opacity down just a bit. Cool. Okay, that is close enough. So I am going to now go about 80%, because now what we're going to do is we're going to refine this a bit more, and I am going to liquefy the underlying layer to fit her face. I want to keep everything her face here. I'm going to keep her jawline. I'm going to keep it so that she looks like her and not like the original AI image. I need to warp the face a bit more because I'm going to selectively mask in the features. So click on the underlying layer, where you're going to right click and we're going to convert to smart object, because this will make it into a smart layer. And any filters I apply to this layer will allow us to go back and make changes to it. Smart filters are quite nice. So it is now a smart object. Go over to my filter and we're going to go to liquefy. Here we are in liquefy. Click on show backdrop. Zoom in a bit. Control plus. All right. There we go. And we're just going to mess with the opacity a bit so that we can see what we need to move around. So already we can see that we need to move around the jawline, the lips a bit, and the eyes. Not necessarily the nose, but we want to get the eyes lined up a bit better. And when we move this and liquefy, we can see what we're actually doing here. So using the open brackets and close brackets, we can then make our brush larger and smaller. You want to make your brush size the same size as the area you want to affect. So I am just pulling the eyes to align with the real eyes, so that when I mask them in, they will blend much more gooder. What am I going to do with the eyebrows? That's really the... Let's see here. So I want to keep the real eyebrows. See how that makeup is. I might keep a little bit of the AI makeup. I don't know. Okay. Eyes are looking... Okay. Now I am not going to keep the real nose because the AI image... I'm sorry, I'm not going to keep the real ears because the AI image doesn't have ears. But I'm going to line this up so that the AI image is just on the outside of the real image. Adjust this mouth a bit more. Just notice it and do that. I want to keep the original, I want to keep the real neck and chest. I want to try and do it in one go, even though it's not really her. Now if we mute this real image, we will see that the bottom image now looks weird. I know that. But what we're going to do is we are going to now mask in the face, the eyes of the real image. But before we do that, I want to keep the real face with the colors of the face to try and match it up later. So I'm just going to do this. Actually, you know what? There. No, I need to keep the shoulders and stuff. Alright. Control J. And that will give you just that. So, I'm now going to move this over here to the right. Now that I have this, I need to try to match the colors of the two as close as possible. So here's where things get tricky. So before I start masking it in, I need to first match the colors. And this is where it gets tricky. So like I showed you before, the highlights are going to be very different. Case in point, let's just kind of create an example here. So here is the highlight from our real image, highlight from our AI image, shadows of the skin of the real image, shadow of the skin of the AI image, and I don't really have, hair color doesn't really matter, but yeah, that's the biggest difference right there. But pretty kind of sort of close. We can see that a lot needs to be done. So what do we do? Well, whenever you are adjusting the color of an image to composite it in better, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind to match it up. You have to match the hue, the saturation, and the luminance first and foremost. You also have to match the color and the luminosity and the contrast. I just mentioned luminance, but color and contrast are also things you have to control. Now, there are a variety of ways to go about doing this. There's also a variety of shortcuts to go about doing it. I'll show you a couple of the things that you might be able to use. I'm not going to use this right now, but one of the things you might be able to use is if you double click on this layer here, and then go to color overlay, and then click on this little swatch panel right there, and then click on the highlight of that. I don't know, even if it's over there, you can do a color overlay of your entire image to try to help it match up a bit more. That's one thing you could do. I'm not going to do that. You can also do something like this, where you go down here and select a curves adjustment, clip it to the layer, then select the curves over here, deselect the mask and select the curves, hold down Alt Option, hit Auto. And then over here, click on the Find Dark and Light Colors, and then turn that off, snap neutral tone. So just find the dark and light colors. Click on your shadows, and then click over here. To find a nice shadow tone. There you go, right there would be good. Okay. Your highlight, click on that part. Neutral tone, something like that. And that will help color your image. Sometimes that'll work. I'm not going to use that either. What I am going to use, however, is I'm going to use some check layers. So what these do, you have all these different check layers here. I got these from Flurn.com, which is a great source to learn photography in Photoshop. The very bottom layer here, it's a channel mixer. It turns it into black and white. So this bottom layer here is one color overlaid the entire image, and the blending mode is set to hue. And this is going to be the one hue as well as saturation. This layer here is one color over the entire image, and it is set to luminosity. So it's one color over the entire image, and you can check your luminosity. Then you can combine these two in certain ways to do further checking of the layers. Anyways, we're going to cover that one at a time. First things first is we are going to get our black and white layer. And now we are going to look at the image on the individual channels. I'm going to load a curves adjustment above my subject, clip that to the real image. Turn off my channel mixer here because we're going to go to channels, select RGB, then select red. So this is the red channel, just the red channel. That is the green, just the green channel. That is the blue, just the blue channel. So by looking at these individual channels, we can see what needs to be adjusted between the two. I'm only going to be adjusting this layer right there. So you can see in this red layer, highlights need to go up and the shadows need to go up as well. So let's go over here. Our curves. So currently our red channel is selected. I'm going to click on our curves. Let's bring this over here. Select our red channel on our curves. Select this little picker right there. So this layer right here is a bit darker than this shadow over here. So we're going to click on that and bring it up a bit. This is fairly close. Now, if you look over here, this gives you an indication of what it looks like in color. So that's very helpful. So our highlights need to go up as well. Actually, the highlights as I bring them up don't look that great. So again, I'm going to continue to click on it's going to be a lot of little tiny adjustments at first. Go to our green layer, go to our green layer, our channels, our curves, compare the two. These go up, brighten, same for the highlights, same for the blue channel. So blues really what need to be adjusted the most. too much. Also, our overall RGB just needs to be brightened a bit more. And of course, in the AI image, there's a lot of magenta in there. So I'm going to do another layer, another curves, clip it, and RGB is what we're working with. The opposite of RGB is CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, and yellow. So we're going to put more magenta in this whole image here. And that is just by pulling down a bit. Just to put some more magenta in there. We also see it needs to have a bit more yellow in skin tones, so. And then brighten it up a tad more. Getting close, getting close. Here's black and white, and now as we can tell now, it's getting pretty close. The shadows down there need to be adjusted. Let's go to our red channel. Actually, I'm going to do another curves. Clip it. Red channel over here. Need darker shadows down there. Turn that off. It's better. As you can see, what I just did was I just turned that channel mixer off since I'm using just these channels over here. If you select RGB and then red, it turns it black and white anyway. So, just going to try to adjust these shadows right now. Green. Go down. Doesn't have to be super duper perfect. Just has to be really close as we can get it. A bit too much dark. Getting there, but that put more blue in it. We definitely need a bit more yellow in the skin tones. You can see this is a warmer image. This is a cooler image. So, and again with the curves. And to get yellow into the image, go to your blue channel, pull down. There we go. Since that darkened it up a bit more, up the RGB. Okay, let's look at our channels again. Interesting. The lips are very different. That's okay. It's just lip color. And okay. Let's see here. Still needs more magenta in there. I'm looking at the shadows of the magenta. This is something that you just have to kind of train your eye to see. Magenta's in the green channels, so we're going to pull that down. There we go. Okay, so now it's getting close. Let's take a look at our hue. Now this is set to hue, and this also takes a look at the saturation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the saturation of this image. You can see how this real image is more saturated than this image. And what I'm looking at is the red in the lips, the red in the skin over here. the red and the shadows. So, arm a new layer. We're going to go to hue saturation, clip it, and bring that saturation down so that the saturation is a bit more like the other one. Now we're going to arm this one. Bring our colors so that the colors match closer. Right. And what we're looking at here between the two, is the highlights. You can see the highlights here. Again, it doesn't have, it's kind of hard to see on the screen there, right? Let's bump it up a bit more. It's not perfect, it doesn't have to be perfect. The shadows over here is really what I'm trying to mess with. Whoa. Trying to get the colors of both of them to look. Now, threshold is interesting. Threshold shows you the overall average of the lighting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use threshold. If you turn threshold all the way up, it kind of shows you the overall darkness and light levels. I'm going to try to use curves to get these two lit a bit closer. Okay, we're going to clip it. We're going to brighten this up a bit. Select the mask, Control I to invert that. Get the brush, soft round brush, flow at 0.5%, 5%. I'm going to use my tablet here. What I'm going to try to do is trying to get these light areas a bit closer. You can mess with this all day if you wanted to, but just trying to get that lighting evened out a bit more. Try to get that right there a bit closer. All right, I'm relatively getting happy with that. A few more things we need to look at. That is the overall. Come on, man. Some more helpers. Let's take a look at the color. This kind of shows you the overall color between the two. So with this help layer, I'm going to go to my color balance. You can see on midtones, shadows, highlights. I'm going to go with the shadows. I'm going to look at the shadows over here and adjust those. Shadows need to be darker. So it's kind of a matter of pulling and pushing these layers and asking yourself, does this look better or does this look worse? Midtones. look better? Does it look worse? Better, worse, darker, lighter? What are we going here with? Hue saturation. For this, we're looking at the gradients here. Wow, that shadow line is very, very different. This definitely has a magenta hue to the shadows, so we're going to manually kind of put that in. Okay. Doesn't have to be super duper perfect. All right, better. Okay, so I'm going to keep this over there. And now I'm going to group all this together. And then I'm going to put a mask, a black mask, over that entire thing. Now, with my brush set to white and a 5% flow, we're going to now paint in the real stuff. In particular, the eyes, the eyebrows. The real nose. The real skin for the forehead. Let's go up to 20%. Real mouth. There's Gina. And of course, the real. Don't know if I want to keep. Cat's trying to get in. Let's see here. Cat wants to come in. Come on in, buddy. Come on. Come on in. It's okay, buddy. My cat wants to come in. Probably going to end up compositing in bits of the original. There's Gina with still needs some work, but that is quite okay. Now the cat wants to leave. Come on, buddy. Come on, buddy. All right. Now the cat wants to get back. No, buddy. You just... Okay, so we're not quite there yet. I'm going to rearm this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do frequency separation. I'm going to continue to steal color from over here and apply it over there. Why does it keep getting rid of my workspace? It's so... anyways. Okay, I know why it's doing that. All right, so we're going to do frequency separation. Frequency separation does is it takes your image and it separates the color from the texture. Color is the low layer, the texture is the high layer. So I have actions for almost all this stuff here. When you do it, you just do it to the point where the skin texture goes away. And now we're going to paint. All right. Okie dokie. So, looks pretty good, but flow at 5%, opacity at 100%. I'm going to take this color over there, kind of apply it over here. Over there, apply it over here. This just helps match the color tones a bit more gooder. And the point of this is to smooth out the transitions of colors. Not too much, just a slight blending of the transitions. I'm not going to reshape the face. We're just going to adjust the splotchiness and adjust the transitions, making the transitions a bit more feathered. Okay. This is harsh. All right, looking pretty good. So now that that is done, I'm not going to go overboard with it. I am going to put a... Oops, why did I do that? Oh, come on. Put a mask on that. And hard brush, 100% mask out this. Have to get rid of that underlying layer, and then I'll just mask out this face there. There. And there is Gina on the geisha there. But still, we've got some work to do. Let's take a look at the original image. So I think there's some parts I need to steal from that to make this part work. Nah, that shoulder was looking messed up too. It's okay. I'm going to... Yeah, okay. Well, I know what to do. I know what to do to fix that. And now we're going to do some liquify to kind of make this look right. And that up there. So this looks a little weird. That looks kind of weird. So I'm just going to kind of push it over a bit. Convert to smart object. Okay, now that it finally saved, let's go ahead and do some liquifying here to correct some artificial intelligence weirdness. Okay, so the headdress looks a little weird and that shoulder looks weird. So we're going to just, whoops, turn that backdrop off. Just round this off just a tiny bit. Just a bit. There we go. Yeah. That's better. That's better. Let's extend this neck down just a tad. Because women like to have long necks. I believe the original one had a longer neck. Okay, now this is bizarre to me. Cool. Make sure nothing's lumpy. We got issue with this. I don't know what the AI did with that, but we gotta fix that. So we're gonna use our spot healing brush tool. Just gonna do some cleanup here. Oh my god, I can't make a straight line. Okay, so we just fixed the shoulders, the neck, some of the little splotchy things from the AI on there as well. Now we're going to do some beauty retouching. Let's start with the eyes. Roll that beautiful beam footage. Now I'll suggest the lips. We're just going to do a bit of a light pop here, just to accentuate the highlights in the lips. Now I'm going to do some dodging and burning. As you can tell, I have actions for all of these things here. B for the brush, soft round brush, 20% flow, 100% opacity. And we're just going to accent the highlights. Looks good underneath the eyes. And the same thing for the burning. The burning. Just going to accent the dark parts and then take that, take that out of the highlights on the blend if mode. I'm just going to give some more added dimension here. Double click, underline layer, hold down Alt, separate that point to take the burning out of the highlights, so it just affects the shadows. Now we're going to do my little magical touch of putting on exposure X6. I have a preset that I use that I've kind of made out of and tweaked over time, so. All right, so there's my little preset color toning thing that I do. I might knock it down a tad. Okay. And I'm going to add let's do that again. Then I do a dark vignette and another curves. Bring it up just a bit. Invert that. G for gradient, circular gradient, white from the nose out to about there. Puts a spotlight on the face. group those as my lights or spotlights. All right. And with that, I'm going to sharpen it at the end. And right now I'm going to give my eyes a rest and then come back to it and see what I think. Okay, so I gave it a day and I came back to it, and there were a few things I noticed that I wanted to change. One of them was the nostrils. I noticed that the nostrils before were a little bit off. I think I might have inadvertently left in some of the original nostrils because they were a bit off balance. So I just went in there and I sort of evened them out with Liquify just to kind of make it look correct, and did some more corrections on them to sort of bring in the natural look of the original photographed nose. Let me see what else I did here. Did I talk about going through the lights and so I added a vignette and I added a spotlight to the face just to kind of bring the focus to the face. And obviously I put a pattern on the back, or a texture on the back. See a little texture right there. I masked out the subject. The white area there is the pattern I put there, and this is just a pattern that photographed. I usually go around with a camera, and if I see a nice looking wall, a well-lit wall with texture, I'll take a photograph of it and turn it black and white, and I'll use that for texture. I just thought that that plain green background was a little bland, I guess. And I added a pattern to the background to make it look more like there's a theme tied to it. And see how her shoulders there don't really have any color cast from the background? I added a slight color cast from the background because whenever you're close to a colored background like that, you're going to get a little bit of color cast on your shoulders. So I just decided to bring that in. And with that, I'm going to call it a day, and I'm going to go into a new part where I go more in depth into these steps here and what these check layers do. So at this point, what I would probably do is I would sharpen it. To sharpen this for the web, if I'm going to put this on Instagram or something, what I would do is I would make a stamp visible layer by doing Control-Alt-Shift. This makes a copy of the entire image onto one layer, and I would duplicate this whenever it gets ready. If you look down here, it's very, let's see here. Look down here at the bottom. See right there, it says 13 point. It's probably hard to see, but that little 13.14%. That is the display image. It is currently showing this image at 13%. So actually, this image is quite large. Whenever this thing is finished. Very important. All right, good. Here's my stamp visible layer. Like I was saying, down here you'll see that this is at 13.14%. It is displaying the image at 13%. Now, that is not the way that the web is going to show this. So what we're going to do is we are going to duplicate this, right click, duplicate layer, put this on a new layer. And as you can see, if I were to increase this to 100%, that's at 100% right there. The web is not going to display that. The web is going to shrink that down, and it will show it only at that. So what I usually do is I will go to image size, and I will decrease this to about, I don't know, 1300, sometimes 1500 on the long end. And what this does is this will get close to how the web will display it. Because the web is going to compress it, and so that it can be displayed on your phone or on your desktop like that. And as you can see down here, it is now 98%. So that's kind of where we want to put it at, and that is where we want to sharpen it. We want to sharpen this. So we want to sharpen this at the pixel range that the web will display it. So I'm going to have an action here for sharpening. And whenever you sharpen something, this is basically creating an unsharp mask here at a certain percent. I'm not going to get all that into it, but whenever you sharpen something, you don't want to sharpen the skin. You just want to sharpen some select areas. So for this, I'm going to sharpen the eyes, the lips a little bit, and a few of the flowers on the dress. What I do is, once this is finished, I will set my brush to about 50% flow. I always keep my opacity at 100%, and then I just adjust the flow so that I can control how much is being put down on the brush. I don't understand when people do adjust their opacity. It doesn't really make sense to me. I always just adjust the flow. So here we are with my sharpen action completed. As you can see, everything is sharpened. So I hold down Alt, hit the mask icon, that makes a black mask, and then I set my flow to about 50%, which is just Shift 5 on the keyboard, and that will make it, oops, I messed up. Yes, I know. Oh my God. Shift 5 on the keyboard makes it 50%, and then I just paint over the areas that I want sharpening until it gets to a point where I like it. And I'm going to do that for a couple of the little flowers there. There you go. And then that's going to be it as far as sharpening. So just a couple of eyes, not going to sharpen the skin at all. And then we're going to export that as a JPEG. So this is not a video on how to sharpen objects. This is just a video on my workflow. So that is what I do for rendering down for the web. Back to my original file here. I just take that stamp visible layer and delete that, and I do another sharpening, larger sharpening. This is just for if I want to print this or put it on some website that supports high resolution images. Anyways, with that, let me go ahead and stop this particular recording and now get back into a more comprehensive breakdown about what I did, in case you're interested in seeing that. Okay, so here is a more detailed explanation about what those check layers were doing and what I was doing and thinking as I was going through those check layers to color correct and match things up to go from this AI image down to this. So let's get rid of all these layers here, and I'll show you again what I was doing, and get rid of that there. Get rid of these. Now Photoshop from here right now has been kind of being goofy and doing some weird stuff. So I'll kind of tell you what that problem is in a second. But anyways, so looking at this, turn off the liquify. So here's where we are starting at, and then I brought in the image of the photographed image, because the idea here is that we're going to start off with this, and we want to duplicate this with photography so that we can composite it in. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the lighting, and we can see that it is a paramount or butterfly lighting with the light almost directly overhead, a bit more to the right to kind of create that shadow over here, more shadows over here and less over here. I showed you that Satellite 3D program that I was using. So once I figured that out and did a cursory or very sort of simple retouch, I brought that image in over here, brought in that, let's see here, get rid of all this stuff here to show you the original. Photoshop is struggling with this large file. Get rid of this mask. So there is the image that I want to composite in. I then duplicated the face and put it over here to the right so we can compare and contrast, because now we have to color correct this thing. And what I did first was I went to the face and armed a curves adjustment layer, clipped that layer to the composite of the photographed image, went over to channels and clicked on RGB, and then clicked on the red channel, because we want to try to get this looking good in black and white as best as we can first before doing any type of fine tuning. So there is your curves layer, and then we go to the red layer, and then over here on curves, go to our red layer right there. And we look at the shadows, the highlights, and the midtones. If you take this little picker right there and float over the different areas, you'll see this little dot pop up over there. You'll see that there's a little dot right there over the shadows, and then there is over here your midtones, and then you have your highlights and whatnot. And we're trying to like that. So we need to get these tones looking as close as possible. So I went through this and I went to each layer, green in the channels and then green in the curves, and then blue in the channels and then blue in the curves. And I just adjusted that one after another. And I usually do several layers of curves adjustments to get that looking good in black and white. Now Photoshop is doing this weird thing where it's not looking the way it did when I was first doing this. I'm not quite sure why, but I'm just going to kind of roll with it. I know it doesn't look correct now, but in the original video it probably looked a lot better. But once you get it looking good in black and white, you go back over here to your RGB, turn all that stuff on, and then I use this check layers over here. And in this group, we have several layers that will help you isolate certain aspects of the images to work on things one at a time. Down here is a channel mixer. This makes it into black and white. And then we have another one up here, which is a hue adjustment. This is basically taking one color, putting it over the image and changing the blending mode to hue. That way you can look at just the hue and the saturation of the image and determine what you need to do to make the saturation look better. As you can see, you have a hue saturation adjustment layer. The photographed image was too saturated, so I brought it down some. It doesn't quite look correct right now because it's doing something weird, but in the original work through video, it looked a little bit better. But this is just my workflow here I'm talking about. And then from there, I have another one color overlaid the entire image, and it is set to luminosity. And now this shows the hues with the luminosity. And at this point, you're just looking at the two and trying to fine tune that within your hue saturation or with your curves. And you are adjusting the saturation of the hue saturation, and you're also pushing and pulling the hue to sort of match it up with the original. And then I determined that I needed to paint in some of the shadow tones on there as well. And then you can also use this hue this layer here, which is set to luminosity with this hue saturation. You can look at the hue, saturation, and luminance between the two, and you can also look at the threshold as well to see what you need to paint in as far as the luminosity of the image. And again, it is not looking quite correct because I think I had that mask on. But in the original work through, it looked a bit closer. It looks a little weird now, but I then did some frequency separation and got rid of that image right there on the side. I used that image there to guide my frequency separation. And let's see here. Again, it's doing something weird. It's creating this sort of shadow over here. But again, I'm just kind of telling you my workflow. Photoshop is being goofy. I use this image over here to the right to sort of guide my frequency separation. I did some further adjustments. Also, I use a different check layer group to look at my little helpers layer here. To look at the color between the twos, and this is what I use to this little selective color adjustment there. I use this to create a selective color adjustment and to match the shadows and the highlights, and do the same thing again. I'm just kind of looking at the hues and the luminosity in a different way. Also adjusting the contrast, which I didn't have to do too much. And then let's get rid of that. From there, got rid of this image over here. Did some beauty stuff with the eyes, kind of made the eyes punched up a bit more, then punched up the lips a bit more, did some dodging and burning to the entire image, put a layer of exposure, which is exposure X6, and I have a little preset I usually kind of tweak on there, which is what I usually use to get my look. Then I did a vignette and a spotlight on the face, and then the texture in the background, the pattern on the background, color cast on the shoulders, and then another layer of sharpening. So to kind of recap there, when you're doing those help layers, you're trying to get it first looking good in black and white, using the channels, the red, blue, and green on the channels to look at the red, green, and blue on a curves adjustment layer, and trying to push and pull the shadows between the two to make them look correct. So you isolate your red channel, and you're looking at the shadows between the two pictures, and you're adjusting your curves to try to match the original image. So you're pushing and pulling the curves in your red curves layer, and you're looking at the red channel on your, so over here in your channels, you're looking at just your red as you adjust the red channel on your curves. Just comparing the two and pushing and pulling the shadows, pushing and pulling the highlights and the midtones, doing the same thing with the greens, doing the same thing with the blues, just trying to get it looking good in black and white. And from there, you can look at just your hue and your saturation and determine if you need to have it less saturated, and determining whether you need to shift the hue a bit left or right and make it match up a bit more. Then you look at your hue and your luminance to see if it's too bright, too dark. You need to adjust that a bit more with curves and so on. From there, you can look at your selective color layer and look at if you need to shift just your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights, and shifting that a bit more. And then look at your contrast to see if you need to mess with your contrast a bit. And then looking at your threshold and seeing where the light fall off and the intensity of the light is between the two images as well. And sort of dodging and burning your image to better match the original image. And from there, I just did some beauty retouching, and that's about it. And at the end, I always do my sharpening at the end. So hope you learned a little bit about how to make this final image there, and how to use photography in your own artificial intelligence generated stuff, whatever they call it now. So hope you enjoyed it.